In the previous chapter, we saw that Clerval is murdered by the monster, and Victor is also imprisoned. He is arrested in connection with this murder, though later on he is acquitted. But now he is so much filled with remorse and guilt that he is determined to keep a watch over his family so that none of them gets harmed by the monster. And at the same time, he awaits the next appearance of the monster, because he knows that the monster would definitely appear once again before him. And in chapter 22, we find that Victor now returns to Geneva with his father, Alphonse Frankenstein. Their journey towards their home begins. Although Victor is now released, he is no longer in the prison, but he is unable to enjoy his freedom on account of his remorse and guilt. As far as the threat is concerned that is given to him by the monster, Victor is unable to understand the implication of the monster's threat, because he felt that the threat was aimed at him, but later on he would realize his mistake, that the threat was actually not meant for him. What the monster implied by his threat is that he actually suggested that what Victor had done to him, he is just going to do the same with Victor. And then now Victor is so depressed, he is so filled with remorse that he avoids all society, and he keeps on insisting that he is the killer, and he tries to convince his father as well. But his father, Alphonse Frankenstein, simply dismisses his claim of being responsible for all the deaths that had occurred. As his ramblings, he feels that Victor is deranged. He's not in a he's not in a healthy state of mind. That's why he's saying all these things. And then Victor receives a letter from Elizabeth, and where Elizabeth doubts Victor's loyalty, and she wants to know whether he really wants to marry her, and if he regrets that he is bound to marry her. However, the letter once again revives this memory of the monster's threat that he will be with him on his wedding night. And Victor feels that on his wedding night, he is the one who would be killed by the monster. And so he realizes that since his end is about to come, he determines to give Elizabeth whatever happiness he can. So now we can see that Victor is torn between family loyalty and happiness, and the threat announced by the monster, because the threat is already there in his mind, while at the same time he is about to get married to Elizabeth. So on one hand, he has his family, he is bound to his family, he is bound to show his loyalty, he is bound to provide all kinds of happiness possible to Elizabeth, because he feels that his end is about to come. The monster would kill him on his wedding night. So in order to reassure Elizabeth, he writes a letter to her and assures her of his love and his good intentions, telling her at the same time that he would be disclosing a terrible secret. So he would disclose everything to Elizabeth once they get married. So he also makes this promise to Elizabeth, that once they get married, he would tell everything to her, and then he returns to Geneva. So next we find that Victor and Elizabeth, they get married. They start their journey to Lake Como for their honeymoon, and the first evening they proceed. They go as far as Lake Geneva. So in this chapter, it is quite clear to us that the monster's threat was actually not directed towards Victor, but it was directed towards Elizabeth. And Victor seems rather, mistaken in interpreting the monster's threat, that it was directed towards him. Not only that, here in this chapter we find that Victor refers to paradisical dreams, which indicates that now Victor begins to, see himself as Adam, and he considers Elizabeth to be his paradise. But since he has, already drunk deeply of forbidden knowledge, since he has already trespassed the boundary of knowledge, he knows it very well that his paradise is lost to him. He can no longer enjoy his paradise. And then this chapter ends with a description of the beauties of nature, from which Victor is now completely excluded because his state of mind does not allow him to enjoy the beauty of nature. And although they depart for their honeymoon, they are married, they're newly married, still we find that the joy of their wedding stands threatened because the because the monster is there and he's going to appear on their wedding night. Next, in chapter 23, we find that Elizabeth is murdered by the monster. And now Victor determines on revenge. He becomes firm, he becomes steadfast that he would be now taking revenge on the monster. This chapter has a very stormy atmosphere, which indicates that the monster would arrive. It indicates the imminent arrival of the monster, which is a Gothic element, because we know that atmosphere, eerie atmosphere, suspense, all these are elements of a Gothic novel. So here Mary Shelley uses this Gothic element, this stormy atmosphere. So as night falls, and we find that there is a fearful storm, and this agitates Victor all the more, and Elizabeth just questions him. And rather not only questions him, but Elizabeth also asks him to have peace. But as far as Victor is concerned, he knows what awaits ahead. So he tells Elizabeth that everything, he tries to, console himself as well as Elizabeth that everything would be safe this night. But he also acknowledges the fact that this night is really very fearful. And then he begins to anticipate that a fight would take place between him and the monster. So anticipating that, what he does, he sends Elizabeth to his room. And when he does this, what he does, he makes Elizabeth open to attack. When Elizabeth is sent to another room, this very action on the part of Victor simply makes Elizabeth open to attack. So, and the way, Victor tries to comfort Elizabeth with his words, tries to calm her, it may be read as his repulsion, as we know, at the thought of the consummation of their marriage, because now he knows that since they are married, there is hardly any way for him to avoid the consummation of their physical love. So what he does, he simply sends Elizabeth away. So we can see that we can consider this step taken by Victor as a means of escaping the quote-unquote union. And then after he sends her away to another room, he immediately hears a scream. And then when he rushes to the room, he finds that Elizabeth, his wife, is lying in a lifeless form. She is lying dead. And then when he recovers, he sickens. And when Victor recovers, he finds the grinning face of the monster once again at the window. And what he's doing, he's simply pointing towards the dead body. So the monster is successful in taking his revenge, because what Victor did, he destroyed his female companion before him. And now what he did, he also did the same with Victor. He also deprived him of his paradise. He also deprived him of his female companion. And after this, when this very news of Elizabeth's death reaches Victor's father, Alphonse Frankenstein, it causes his death because it causes much distress and despair, and out of despair he breathes his last. And now Victor feels that since Elizabeth is murdered by the monster, so he decides to return to Geneva, fearing that his remaining family are under threat. And as I said, his father, because of this, at the news of Elizabeth's death, is heartbroken and he dies. After this, Victor's mental condition deteriorates and he spends some time in a mental asylum. And upon his release, when he gets released from the asylum, he determines to take revenge. And then he tells his entire story to a magistrate who is, unable to believe his words. He because it is quite natural that nobody would believe such stories that Victor has created a monster, who is responsible for the deaths of his family members. So although the magistrate is incredulous, he, but still he claims to believe his story, but then he refuses to take any action. And Victor gets enraged and he also denounces him because he accuses the monster, telling him that he is proud of his wisdom and it seems as if he feels as if he knows everything, but actually he is ignorant. He has become ignorant out of his pride of his wisdom, and you really don't know what it is you say because the magistrate declines to extend any to he declines to offer any help to Victor. So after the death of Elizabeth's after the death of Elizabeth, okay, the monster waits for Victor's recovery from sickness. This is also, another Gothic element where there is a psychic communication between characters. Earlier, also remember, Victor always thought that the monster is somewhere around him, and whenever he had those such thoughts in his mind, immediately after some time, the monster used to appear before him. So here also, the monster is also, aware of Victor's whereabouts, and wherever he goes, he reaches there. So this chapter is significant because we find that leaving Elizabeth when Victor leaves Elizabeth alone in the room, it draws the monster's rage, and the monster finds the opportunity to attack her, and which she indicates that Victor actually leaves her open to any kind of attack. And here, the language that is used to describe the appearance of the monster that is waiting at the window, he is grinning. The same language, it again, and while he is pointing towards the dead body of Elizabeth, it again resembles the language that was used to describe that fearful night when this monster was created. And it again draws a link between birth and death, because the atmosphere, the language which is used to describe the fearfulness, the dreadfulness of the night, it was the night, it is the same language that is used to describe this very night when Elizabeth is murdered. And it is the same language, it resembles the language that was used by Mary Shelley to describe the night when the monster was created. So that was the night when the monster took birth, and this is the night when Elizabeth meets her unfortunate, untimely death. And so this takes us back to the nightmare that followed. So the monster also here we find that, as I said, he waits for Victor's recovery so that an encounter may take place between them. So this shows the psychic communication between characters, between Victor and the monster. Chapter 24 is the concluding chapter of the novel. And Victor's narrative, as we know, Victor's narrative concludes in this chapter. Whatever had happened to him, it concludes in this chapter. Uh, he describes a visit to the cemetery where the murdered members of his family lie. And now Victor, after he visits the cemetery where all his family members are buried, he vows to avenge the death of his family members. And then now he feels that he would pursue the monster. He begins his pursuit of the monster. And this scene, now if you look at this portion, it appears to be very dramatic, very theatrical, because the way Victor, voices aloud his determination to avenge the death of his family members. It appears to be quite a theatrical, dramatic moment. And now Victor begins his pursuit of the monster, and he begins to follow him to the Black Sea, and then on to on to Tartary and Russia. And Victor's account of what he refers to, as his pilgrimage concludes with his desperate condition when he is now completely left alone, isolated on an ice raft. He's all alone. So now he describes, Victor refers to this, like when he's going in the pursuit of his monster, when he's all determined to pursue the monster, to take revenge on him. He described it as his pilgrimage. But then when he's marooned, when he's left all alone on an ice raft, Victor sees a Walton ship. So now we go back to that point where Victor was taken board on Walton's ship. And now Walton, is made to promise by Victor to kill the monster in case he dies in his pursuit of the monster. He asks Walton, to swear that if he dies, in case Walton should, if he gets the opportunity, he should kill the monster on behalf of Victor. And then we already know that there is an epistolary form. The novel began in the form of letters that were being written by Walton to his sister Margaret. So Walton continues writing the story in a series of letters to Margaret. He expresses, and in those letters he expresses, his admiration for Victor as well as pity for him. And after this we find that Victor, Victor's mental state continuously deteriorate, and he spurns both Walton's offer of friendship and his attempts to reconcile him with life, because Walton tries to persuade Victor to reconcile him with life, but now he is hell-bent to destroy the monster. He doesn't actually, for Victor at this point, he doesn't want anything else from his life. His only aim in life, his only objective now is to destroy the monster. So, and in the meantime, what happens that it appears like as if Walton's ship will be destroyed by the encroaching ice, and so he feels he's afraid that a revolt might take place from the despairing on the part of the despairing crew. And the sailors on the ship, they demand that they would like to return home. And then Victor delivers a very moving speech and tells them that to be men, or be more than men. Though his speech succeeds in moving the sailors, but still they demand Walton to promise them. And though Walton is disappointed, because he knows that if he has to return home, he will not be able to fulfill his ambition, he would not be able to fulfill his dream, still he promises the sailors. So after this, the final letter, which concludes both the chapter and the book, there Victor affirms, then we find that it is then we come across the last letter, which is written by Walton, and which concludes, as I said, this chapter and the novel as well. So Victor here we find that he affirms his belief that how necessary it is to destroy the monster, and therefore he begs Walton that to take on his quest. And after this, after speaking this words, Victor dies. And then Walton finds the monster. So we find that Victor and the monster, they now seem to compete with each other with regard to their suffering. Victor claims himself to be the one who suffered the most, and the monster claims to suffer the most. And by doing this, they try to they try to draw similarity between himself and Milton, because in Milton's Satan, in Milton's Paradise Lost, Satan is depicted as the most miserable of all beings. So we find that both of them claim their resemblance to Milton's Satan. So they no longer try to draw a similarity with Adam. Rather, they find, be it Victor or the monster, both of them find that they share more similarities with Satan than that of Adam, because Satan is depicted as the most miserable of all beings, and so do they claim themselves to be. As far as the monster's final speech is concerned, where he says, where he regrets his doings, where he is filled with remorse and grief and horror that he has done wrong to this great man, Victor. And he also expresses his admiration and respect for the creator, and he also at the same time he considers himself as a creature who is to be kicked and hated. It emphasizes that the monster's monstrousness or cruelty is in no way different from that of the society, because society rejected him, abandoned him, treated him as the other on account of his deformed physical appearance. Society showed immense cruelty towards him, and this is what he did with his creator. He showed his monstrousness, he failed to return his goodness, and so he says that evil is something which overpowered his goodness. When he took birth, when he was created by his creator, he was a benevolent creature, a kind creature who felt sympathy for the grief of others. But later on, he turned malevolent, and he harmed the family members of his creator. So the monster's final speech is significant from this perspective, that he finds his monstrousness, his cruelty, in no way different from that of the society. At the same time, we find that Shelley suggests that the kind of quests, ambitions, dreams that are nurtured by people like Victor and Walton, they can never lead to anything good. Rather, such dreams and quests can only end with destruction. So it would be better for Walton to give up on his ambition, to give up his quest, because Victor's destruction is brought about by his quest. Because it is his quest which made him create the monster and the consequences. And the final letter that is written by Walton closes the novel. Now, it is very necessary to understand why Mary Shelley has used Walton's version of the story. Why Mary Shelley is using Walton's version of the story. She is simply using it to make Victor's story more believable, as a witness, as an evidence. And in order to, make Walton's version of the story appear very authentic and credulous, Walton is also made to add some validity by mentioning that he not only saw Victor's letters, but he also met the monster. And that is why in the final chapter we find that Walton finds, after the death, after Victor breathes his last, Walton finds the monster bending over the corpse of his creator. And this version is used by Shelley in order to make Victor's story more believable and authentic. And with this, we come to the end of the novel.